The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. Meister Eckhart. In the quiet spaces between thoughts, in the shadowlands between perception and reality, there exists a domain that few ever learn to navigate. Not because this realm is inaccessible, but because most never realize it's there. We live in an age of constant distraction, a time where attention is the currency and clarity is in short supply. Every moment, 1,000 voices compete for your focus, telling you what to value, who to become, how to measure your worth. And in this cacophony, something essential becomes lost: your sovereign awareness. Today I want to speak not about escaping reality, not about rejecting the world, but about mastering the invisible architecture that shapes how you experience everything. I want to invite you into a way of seeing that transforms not just what you perceive, but who you become in the perceiving. The strongest people you'll ever meet aren't necessarily the loudest or most visible. They are those who have learned to inhabit their existence with full consciousness, awake to the forces that would define them, yet defined by something deeper still. Let me share with you 5 ancient principles of inner sovereignty. These are not strategies for manipulation, but pathways to authentic presence. They may appear counterintuitive in a world that rewards performance, but they are timeless truths that will help you transcend the prison of external validation and stand firmly in your own authority. Rule number 1, the sovereignty of conscious attention. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. This is not just poetic language. It is the foundation of how consciousness operates. Every moment of your waking life, you are directing the force of your awareness somewhere, and that direction is rarely accidental. It is orchestrated. Here's what they never told you. Attention is not just something you give. It is something that is constantly being taken from you. The modern world has engineered increasingly sophisticated methods to capture, direct, and profit from your focus. Every notification, headline, and advertisement is designed to bypass your sovereign choice and pull your consciousness towards something external. But what is the tension is not merely a resource to be spent, but the very substance of your experience. What if your life is quite literally made of what you attend to? Then the capacity to direct your attention consciously becomes not just a skill, but the master key to your inner kingdom. Those who cannot control their attention are not truly free. They may believe they're making choices, but they're merely responding to the most compelling stimuli in their environment. Like a leaf carried by whatever wind blows strongest, they drift through experiences curated by forces outside themselves. The shift begins when you recognize that attention is not passive, but active. It is not something that happens to you, but through you. You are not the thoughts that pass through your awareness. You are the awareness itself. And this awareness can be trained, directed, and mastered. Simone Weil understood this when she wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. What we offer our attention to, we offer our life to. Each moment of focus is a moment of your finite existence directed towards something. Will it be toward what truly matters, or toward what merely shouts the loudest? The practice begins with noticing, becoming aware of where your attention naturally flows and the forces that pull it. Notice how often your focus is reactive rather than intentional. Notice how quickly your mind is trained to shift from one thing to the next, never fully arriving anywhere. Then begin the patient work of reclaiming sovereignty. Start small, with moments of deliberate, undivided attention. Feel what it's like to be fully present with one thing, whether it's the sensation of your breath, the face of someone you love, or the task before you. Experience the quiet power that emerges when attention is unified rather than fragmented. Those who master attention master themselves. Those who master themselves need not control others because they recognize the fundamental truth. Real power does not come from manipulating the external world, but from inhabiting your internal one with complete awareness. This is the first doorway to sovereignty, not through domination, but through presence. Rule number 2. The space between stimulus and response. In the infinitesimal gap between what happens to you and how you react exists the seed of your freedom. Most people live without ever discovering this space. They believe their reactions are inevitable, that their emotions are identical to the events that trigger them. But this is the primary illusion that keeps them bound. Viktor Frankl, having endured the unimaginable suffering of Nazi concentration camps, emerged with a profound insight. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This space exists not just in extreme circumstances, but in every moment of your daily life. It exists when someone criticizes you. It exists when plans collapse. It exists when fears arise. It exists when desire beckons. But few have trained themselves to inhabit this space consciously. Here's what they never told you. Reactions feel mandatory, but they are optional. What feels like an automatic response is actually a conditioned pattern. And anything that has been conditioned can be reconditioned. The emotional programs running beneath your conscious awareness were installed, some by evolution, some by culture, some by personal experience, but they can be modified. The mind, untrained in awareness, believes, "This made me angry." The sovereign mind understands, "I became angry in response to this." The difference is not semantic. It is the difference between being a victim of circumstance and being the author of your experience. The shift begins when you start to witness your reactions rather than being immediately consumed by them. When criticism comes, instead of instantly defending or attacking, you notice the impulse to do so. You feel the contraction in your chest, the narrowing of your vision, the rehearsal of justifications, and in that noticing, you've already stepped into the space of choice. This does not mean suppressing authentic emotion. In fact, it allows for something more genuine to emerge. When you respond from awareness rather than reactivity, what flows through you comes from your depths rather than your conditioning. You speak not from wounded ego, but from centered presence. The sovereign individual is not one who never feels fear, anger, or desire, but one who is not controlled by these forces. They feel everything, perhaps even more intensely than others, but they remain the witness to these experiences rather than becoming identified with them. Make no mistake, this space between stimulus and response is not something you need to create. It already exists. Your task is to become aware of it, to inhabit it, to expand it through practice. And as you do, you'll discover that true power lies not in controlling circumstances, but in choosing how you meet them. Rule number 3, the paradox of identity. Who are you? This question seems simple until you look closely. Most people answer with descriptions of their roles, their beliefs, their histories, their traits. I am a mother. I am ambitious. I am damaged. I am a survivor. But all of these are stories about the self, not the self itself. Here's what they never told you. Your identity is both the most intimate aspect of your experience and the most externally influenced. The I that you refer to when you say I am is largely constructed from outside materials, cultural expectations, family patterns, social feedback, and psychological imprinting. You did not create most of what you consider to be you. The Buddhist tradition points to this when speaking of anatta, or non-self, the recognition that what we call the self is a process rather than a fixed entity. The Western philosopher David Hume noted that when he looked inward, he could find perceptions, sensations, and thoughts, but no solid I to which these experiences happened. This is not merely philosophical abstraction. It is the key to liberation. Because if what you call you is largely composed of conditioned patterns and borrowed ideas, then it can be decomposed and reconstructed. You are not stuck with the identity you have inherited or developed. You can author yourself. The shift begins with a profound inquiry into the nature of your identity. Not the content of your personality, but the context in which personality appears. Not who you think you are, but what is aware of your thoughts about who you are. This inquiry is not intellectual, it is experiential. It happens in moments of deep presence, when you notice that regardless of what changes in your experience, something unchanging witnesses it all. Carl Jung understood this paradox when he distinguished between the ego, the I we normally identify with, and the self, the deeper, more encompassing awareness. The ego is concerned with maintaining its boundaries and narratives. The self is the ground of being from which the ego emerges, like a wave from the ocean. Those who remain identified solely with their conditioned personality are vulnerable to manipulation. When your sense of self is attached to specific traits, roles, or stories, anyone who threatens these attachments seems to threaten your very existence. This is why people fight so fiercely over identities: political, religious, professional, or personal. They believe their survival is at stake. But the one who has glimpsed their nature beyond conditioned identity is unthreatened by differences or challenges to their self-concept. They can hold their personality lightly, adapting fluidly to circumstances without losing their center. They can embrace seemingly contradictory aspects of themselves without fragmentation. This is the paradox. True individuality emerges not from reinforcing a rigid identity, but from recognizing the fluid, constructed nature of identity itself. You become most uniquely yourself when you're least attached to any particular version of yourself. You find your authentic voice when you speak from the awareness beneath all your conditioned patterns. This is not self-erasure. It is self-realization in its deepest sense. Rule number 4, the alchemy of shadow integration. Every strength casts a shadow. Every virtue contains its vice. Every conscious intention is paired with an unconscious counterpart. These are not poetic metaphors, but psychological realities that shape your every action, reaction, and relationship, often without your awareness. Here's what they never told you. What you reject in yourself doesn't disappear. It goes underground. The qualities you deem unacceptable or incompatible with your self-image don't vanish when disowned. They operate autonomously in the shadow realms of your psyche. And from these shadows, they sabotage your conscious intentions with remarkable precision. Jung called this the shadow, the repository of disowned aspects of the self. But the shadow is not merely the dark side. It contains everything we have rejected, including positive qualities deemed too threatening, vulnerable, or powerful for our conscious identity to integrate. The most virtuous among us often harbor the deepest shadows. The crusader for justice may be unable to acknowledge their own cruelty. The caretaker may be blind to their resentment. The spiritual seeker may deny their ambition. Not because they are hypocrites, but because the human psyche requires balance, and what is not integrated consciously will express itself unconsciously. The shift begins when you recognize that nothing human is foreign to you, when you stop defining yourself by what you reject and start embracing the full spectrum of your humanity. This does not mean acting on every impulse, but acknowledging every impulse as information about your wholeness. Shadow work is not about indulgence, but integration. It's about bringing unconscious material into consciousness, where it can be transformed from a liability into an asset. The jealousy you've disowned contains vital information about what you value. The anger you suppress holds the energy of your boundaries. The desire you deny points toward your authentic longings. Those who refuse this inner work remain vulnerable to projection, seeing in others what they cannot acknowledge in themselves. They are triggered by qualities in the world that mirror their disowned aspects. They find themselves mysteriously attracted to people who embody their shadow, either to condemn them or to vicariously experience what they've denied in themselves. But the sovereign individual understands that wholeness comes not from perfection, but from integration. They have the courage to look at what others avoid, the unwanted emotions, the uncomfortable truths, the rejected parts of self. And in that courageous seeing, something remarkable happens. The energy previously used to repress these elements becomes available for creative expression. This is the alchemy of shadow work, the transformation of lead into gold, of unconscious compulsion into conscious choice. When you embrace your full humanity, you no longer project your disowned qualities onto others. You no longer need to find someone to blame, fix, or save. You become a vessel large enough to hold the full complexity of your experience without fragmentation. And in that integration, you discover an authentic power that needs neither defense nor display. Rule number 5, the courage of sincere uncertainty. In a world that rewards certainty, there is profound power in embracing the unknown. Not as resignation, not as intellectual posturing, but as the genuine recognition that reality is vaster than any model we construct of it. This is not weakness. It is the foundation of true wisdom. Here's what they never told you. Certainty is often fear disguised as knowledge. The compulsive need to have answers, to be right, to eliminate doubt. These are not signs of intellectual strength, but of existential insecurity. The ego craves certainty because uncertainty feels like death to the part of you that believes survival depends on control. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard understood this when he wrote that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. To stand at the edge of the known and gaze into the mystery of what lies beyond is vertigo-inducing. It requires a courage that mere certainty never demands. Those who cling to rigid beliefs, whether religious, political, or personal, are often not displaying conviction, but avoiding the vulnerability of not knowing. True conviction is supple, alive, responsive to reality. It can incorporate new information without shattering because it's not built on the elimination of doubt, but on the embrace of mystery. The shift begins when you distinguish between useful maps and absolute truth. Every framework of understanding, scientific, spiritual, psychological, is a map, not the territory itself. Even our most sophisticated models are approximations of a reality, too complex to fully capture in concepts. The wise individual values maps for their utility, while remembering that all maps simplify and distort. This does not mean abandoning discernment or critical thinking. Quite the opposite. It means applying these faculties not just to what you reject, but to what you accept. It means holding your own cherished beliefs to the same standard of scrutiny that you apply to ideas you find challenging. It means recognizing that truthfulness involves acknowledging the limits of what you know. Physicist Richard Feynman captured this when he said, "I think it's much more interesting to live not knowing than to have answers that might be wrong." This is not relativism, the claim that all views are equally valid. It is epistemological humility, the recognition that validity is a matter of degree, context, and purpose, rather than absolute correspondence with an objective reality we can never access directly. Those who practice sincere uncertainty develop a relationship with reality characterized by curiosity rather than conquest. They approach differences of perspective not as threats to be eliminated, but as opportunities to expand understanding. They listen not to refute, but to learn. They hold space for complexity rather than reducing it to simplicity. And paradoxically, this uncertainty becomes a form of groundedness more stable than any certainty. Because it doesn't depend on being right. It doesn't collapse when challenged. It doesn't require enemies to define itself against. It stands on the solid foundation of acknowledged unknowing. The truly powerful are not those who claim to have all the answers, but those who remain open to the questions. Not those who never doubt, but those who make doubt part of their path to deeper understanding. Not those who eliminate uncertainty, but those who develop the capacity to function skillfully within it. This is not just philosophical sophistication, it is spiritual maturity. These 5 principles are not techniques for controlling your environment, but practices for inhabiting your existence with greater awareness. They don't promise to make life easier. In fact, they may initially make it more challenging as you confront what you've been avoiding. But they offer something far more valuable than ease. They offer integrity of being. In a world where external power is worshipped, the power of wealth, status, influence, or force, these principles point to a different kind of authority. Not power over others, but sovereignty within yourself. Not the fragile dominance that must be constantly defended, but the stable presence that needs no defense. The masters of consciousness throughout history, from Buddha to Jesus, from Lao Tzu to Marcus Aurelius, did not teach manipulation, but transformation. They understood that true change never begins with controlling others, but with liberating yourself from the illusions that bind you. They recognized that authentic influence flows not from technique, but from embodiment. So I invite you to a different kind of mastery, not the mastery that seeks to bend reality to its will, but the mastery that aligns itself with what is real. Not the power that imposes itself on the world, but the authority that emerges from deep congruence between inner and outer, between word and deed, between consciousness and conduct. This path is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming fully who you already are beneath the conditioned patterns and protective strategies. It's about clearing away what isn't authentic so that what is genuine can emerge. It's about remembering what you've always known but forgotten under the weight of adaptation. The world doesn't need more people skilled at manipulation or domination. It needs individuals who have done the inner work to stand in their truth without needing others to validate it. It needs men and women who have faced their shadows and integrated their fragmented aspects. It needs human beings who embody the rare combination of strength and openness, conviction and curiosity, purpose and presence. This is your invitation to that embodiment, not through techniques of control, but through practices of awareness, not through accumulating more knowledge, but through deepening your relationship with the knowing that already lives within you. Not through becoming invulnerable, but through finding the strength that exists at the heart of vulnerability itself. This is the path of sovereignty, not over others, but within yourself. And from that sovereignty, everything else flows.